For even the smallest clue that might reveal the culprits, hours crawled by. Father Miguel sat silently in the dim light of his office, eyes glued to the monitor in front of him. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as he scanned the security footage, frame by frame, hoping for any detail that might lead him closer to understanding who was behind the recent break-ins at the church. The silence around him was only broken by the occasional mechanical hum of the building, filled with nothing but the usual flickering lights and shifting shadows cast by the glow of the street lamps outside. Just as Miguel considered giving up for the night, exhaustion threatening to pull him away from the screen, a familiar figure appeared. The silhouette flickered onto the screen with quiet certainty. It was Cardinal Luis Antonio. The cardinal moved with purpose, his step steady and sure, completely unaware of the camera capturing his every action. Miguel leaned closer, heart beginning to race. What happened next left Father Miguel frozen in his chair, his pulse pounding in his ears, his heart racing in disbelief. 2 weeks earlier, the atmosphere in the town had been entirely different. The streets had been alive with excitement, buzzing with anticipation. Word had spread quickly through the parish and beyond. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle was coming to visit. The announcement sent ripples of elation throughout the town, igniting a spark of anticipation in everyone, from the most devout churchgoers to those who rarely set foot inside St. Sophia's. Cardinal Tagle's reputation for compassion and humility had reached far beyond the church walls, making him a figure admired by all. His upcoming visit was not just a religious event, it was a moment of hope for a community in need. In the days leading up to his arrival, the parish became a hive of activity. Volunteers scrubbed every inch of the church. The pews were polished until they gleamed under the sanctuary lights, and the courtyard was swept clean of every fallen leaf. Decorations were carefully arranged, floral displays chosen for their symbolism and color. It was all done to honor such a distinguished guest. The excitement was palpable. "Good afternoon, everybody," Father Miguel had announced to a gathering crowd, his voice buoyant with enthusiasm. "I hope that everybody has a wonderful start to the new ecclesiastical year. Welcome back to St. Sophia's. Today, we're here, with the help of Cosmos Philly, to show you what's the newest thing going on here at St. Sophia in terms of our church." His words echoed through the nave as families began arriving hours before the service, eager to secure a spot close enough to see the cardinal in person. The church filled quickly, pew after pew occupied by expectant faces. Soon, even the courtyard overflowed with people craning their necks for a glimpse of the man whose presence carried an almost tangible sense of hope. Father Miguel stood by the main entrance, fidgeting nervously with his collar. Though the evening air was cool, his palms were damp with sweat. He had met Cardinal Tagle before, but this occasion felt different, more significant. The recent string of burglaries had left the parish anxious and uneasy. Miguel silently prayed that the cardinal's visit might bring some much-needed relief, even if only spiritual. Then came the sound they had all been waiting for, the gentle crunch of gravel under tires. A sleek black car rolled to a smooth stop just outside the church gates. Miguel took a deep breath and stepped forward as the vehicle door opened. The cardinal emerged, his signature warm smile lighting up his face as he offered a slight bow to the gathered crowd. "Your Eminence." Miguel greeted him, bowing deeply. The cardinal's presence seemed to ripple through the assembled parishioners like a wave of calm. Faces that had been tense with worry now softened with smiles. People greeted one another with warmth, as if the mere sight of Cardinal Tagle had lifted a burden from their hearts. Inside the church, the cardinal moved through the sea of people with ease and grace. He shook hands, offered blessings, and spoke to each person with genuine interest. His charisma was undeniable, his humility radiant. He had a way of making people feel seen, valued. Miguel watched from the edge of the crowd, admiration blooming in his chest. Despite his high rank, Cardinal Tagle carried himself with the humility of a servant. His charisma seemed effortless, like a natural extension of his being. Yet, as Miguel continued to observe, something caught his attention. Clara, the church housekeeper, stood near the side aisle. Normally quiet and composed, she appeared unusually tense. Her hands fidgeted at her sides, and she kept glancing toward the cardinal with an expression that Miguel couldn't quite decipher. Was it fear, concern, or something else entirely? It was subtle, but unsettling. Miguel made a mental note to speak with her later. For now, the focus remained on the cardinal and the transformative energy his visit had brought to the parish. Little did Miguel know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew. That evening, Clara lingered in the shadows near the sacristy. Her hands were clasped tightly together, knuckles white, her gaze flitting nervously toward Cardinal Tagle. Her posture was rigid, as though she were bracing herself for something she dreaded. When the cardinal finally moved closer, she hesitated. Just for a moment. Then she stepped forward, her eyes downcast. In a hushed tone, she whispered something to him. Her words were inaudible from where Father Miguel stood. The cardinal responded with a slight nod. His face remained a mask of calm, revealing nothing of their exchange. Without another word, Clara turned and exited the room abruptly. Her pale face was etched with an emotion Miguel couldn't quite name. Was it fear? Guilt? Whatever it was, it unsettled him. Miguel's stomach churned as he tried to make sense of what he had just witnessed. Clara had always been composed and discreet, never one to draw attention to herself. Yet here she was, behaving in a way that seemed entirely out of character, especially in the presence of someone as revered as Cardinal Tagle. Miguel attempted to brush off his unease, chalking it up to nerves over the day's important events. But the memory of Clara's fleeting words, and the cardinal's cryptic response, refused to leave him. A nagging suspicion began to take root in the corners of his mind, whispering that their interaction carried a weight he couldn't yet understand. As the evening progressed, Miguel tried his best to focus on his duties. He greeted parishioners, ensured the cardinal's visit unfolded smoothly, and did his best to keep up appearances. But his thoughts kept circling back to Clara. What had she said? Why had she appeared so rattled? Miguel pushed the questions aside, determined not to let his overthinking ruin what should have been a joyous occasion. It was nearing midnight when the shrill buzz of Miguel's phone shattered the silence of his modest bedroom. Startled, he fumbled for the device on his nightstand, squinting at the screen through blurry eyes. The caller ID displayed the name of the security company responsible for monitoring the recently installed cameras at the church. A cold knot of anxiety twisted in his chest. After weeks of uneventful surveillance, a call at this hour could only mean one thing: trouble. Father Miguel, came the operator's calm yet urgent voice. We've detected some unusual activity on the church premises. You may want to review the footage from camera 3, near the east corridor. Miguel hung up, his heart pounding. He pulled on a jacket over his nightclothes and hurried toward the small office where the security monitors were housed. The church was eerily silent, its long corridors cloaked in shadow. Moonlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting fractured colors onto the stone floor. But the beauty of the scene did little to ease Miguel's growing unease. Seated in the glow of the monitors, Miguel navigated to the footage from earlier that evening. At first, everything looked normal: empty hallways, locked doors, and the stillness that always settled over the church after hours. But as the timestamp crept past 11 p.m., a figure emerged from the shadows. Its movements were deliberate and cautious. Miguel's breath caught in his throat. The figure stepped further into the frame, and the dim light revealed the unmistakable form of Cardinal Luis Antonio. Miguel leaned in, his pulse quickening. The cardinal's movements were deliberate, almost furtive, as though he were wary of being seen. He paused every few steps to glance over his shoulder, scanning the darkness with a weariness that didn't match the composed, benevolent man Miguel had seen earlier that day. Miguel's chest tightened. What was the cardinal doing, wandering the church at this hour? The more he watched, the more troubling the scene became. The cardinal's actions were precise, almost as if he were searching for something, or someone. Miguel couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more to this late-night excursion than met the eye. And as the footage continued, what he saw next left him gripping the edge of the desk. Cardinal Tagle approached Clara's quarters. He paused just outside her door. His hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating for a brief moment. Then he glanced down the dimly lit hallway one last time, ensuring no one was watching. Satisfied that he was alone, he turned the knob and slipped inside, disappearing into the room. Father Miguel sat frozen, his eyes fixed on the monitor. His mind raced, struggling to reconcile the image of the respected and revered cardinal with the man moving so covertly through the church halls. A wave of doubt and confusion washed over him. His first instinct was to give the cardinal the benefit of the doubt. Surely, there had to be an innocent explanation. Perhaps the cardinal needed something urgent from Clara, or maybe he was delivering news best handled in private. Yet the secrecy, the cautious glances over his shoulder, the odd timing, none of it sat right. Miguel replayed the footage, scrutinizing every detail. The cardinal's movements were deliberate, almost calculated. His behavior wasn't just cautious, it was methodical. Miguel leaned back in his chair, unease growing with each passing second. The late hour and the Cardinal's choice to visit Clara's room of all places didn't make sense. What could he be doing in Clara's room? Miguel muttered to himself. He tried to brush aside the darker possibilities creeping into his thoughts, but they clung stubbornly, refusing to be silenced. After 30 minutes of re-watching the footage and reaching no satisfying conclusion, Miguel turned off the monitor and rubbed his temples. He resolved to keep an eye on the situation, gathering more information before jumping to conclusions. Deep down, though, a gnawing unease lingered. The Cardinal's actions hinted at something far more complex than Miguel could yet comprehend. He tried to shake the feeling as he left the office, but the church's corridors seemed darker than usual. The silence more oppressive. Miguel told himself he was doing the right thing by waiting. But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that his hesitation might come at a cost he couldn't yet foresee. The next morning, Father Miguel arrived early at the church, the weight of what he had seen pressing heavily on his shoulders. The sunlight poured through the stained glass windows in kaleidoscopic hues, giving the interior a peaceful glow. But Miguel felt anything but peaceful. The events of the night before gnawed at him like a slow, corrosive acid. The image of Cardinal Tagle slipping quietly into Clara's quarters wouldn't leave his mind. He tried to focus on the day's duties, preparing the altar, reviewing the schedule for confessions, and checking the donation logs, but each task felt mechanical, detached from the gravity of what he knew. At times, he would find himself standing still, eyes staring blankly at the chapel walls, as his thoughts turned over again and again what he should do next. Clara didn't appear for morning prayers. It wasn't like her to miss them. She was punctual to a fault, always in her modest uniform, always reverent in her duties. Miguel walked through the church halls with a creeping sense of dread. When he reached her quarters and knocked softly, there was no answer. He knocked again, more urgently this time, but still, silence. Reluctantly, he opened the door. The small room was neat, the bed made, the curtains open to let in the morning light. But Clara was gone. Her rosary lay on the bedside table, as if she had left in a hurry and forgotten it, something utterly out of character. Miguel's eyes swept the room, noting that a few personal items were missing: a scarf, her favorite worn Bible, a small suitcase from the corner closet. He stepped back out of the room, confusion mounting. Where had she gone? And why hadn't she told anyone? That evening, during Vespers, Cardinal Tagle delivered a sermon that left the congregation in awe. He spoke of grace, of finding faith in the midst of darkness, of seeking strength through humility. His voice was steady, resonant, and filled with warmth. Parishioners hung on his every word, many moved to tears. But as Miguel listened from the back of the church, his hands folded tightly in front of him, he couldn't shake the unease rising in his chest. He had seen the Cardinal act one way in public, a beacon of piety and wisdom, and another in private, slinking through the darkened halls like a man with secrets. The contrast disturbed him more with each passing hour. After the service, Cardinal Tagle approached him with a smile. "Father Miguel," he said, placing a gentle hand on the younger priest's shoulder. "You've done a marvelous job here. I see the Lord's work alive in this parish." "Thank you, Your Eminence," Miguel replied with a tight smile. The Cardinal's gaze lingered on him for a moment, and for the first time, Miguel noticed something behind the man's eyes, something cold, calculating. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the usual warmth, but it was enough. Miguel's instincts, sharpened over years of ministry, were screaming. Later that night, alone once more in the church office, Miguel opened a new browser window on the parish computer. He hesitated for a moment before typing, "Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle scandal." At first, there was nothing, just articles praising his charity work, his efforts to reform diocesan operations, his speeches on global ethics. But as Miguel dug deeper, sifting through forums and obscure blogs, he began to find whispers, barely visible footprints, of something else. A former seminarian who had mysteriously transferred dioceses without explanation. A nun who had abruptly left her order shortly after Tagle visited her convent. All were vague, unsubstantiated. But a pattern was there if one looked closely enough. His heart pounded as he printed what he could find. The printer clicked softly in the quiet office, each sheet of paper adding weight to the growing suspicion forming in Miguel's chest. He filed the documents away in a locked drawer and took a long breath. This wasn't proof. But it was enough to justify caution. Enough to justify watching the Cardinal more closely. The next few days were a blur of whispered conversations, quick glances, and a gnawing tension that seemed to pervade the very air in the church. Clara remained missing. No word from her family. No explanation. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Miguel asked around discreetly, but no one had seen her. And then, one night, he returned to the office to find the security system offline. The monitors were blank. A power failure? He checked the circuit breaker. All seemed normal. The cameras were intact, but someone had disabled the feed. Miguel's breath caught. Someone had tampered with the system. Recently. That was the final push. The following morning, Miguel requested a private audience with Bishop Romero, an old mentor from seminary days who had since taken a post in the nearby diocese. He traveled quietly and met the bishop at a secluded rectory out of town. Romero listened in silence as Miguel recounted the events, the strange surveillance footage, Clara's behavior, her sudden disappearance, the whispers he had found online. "I don't know what I'm looking at," Miguel finished, his voice tight. "But I think something is very wrong." The bishop sat back, steepling his fingers. "Luis Antonio Tagle is a rising star in the church," he said slowly. "Protected, admired, and very powerful. If there's something beneath the surface, exposing it will be difficult. Dangerous." "I'm not looking to destroy him," Miguel replied. "But Clara, she might be in trouble. And I can't ignore what I've seen." Romero nodded, his expression grave. "Then we'll start quietly. I'll make some inquiries. If anything comes up, anything solid, we'll escalate." They parted with a quiet prayer, and Miguel returned to his parish with the weight of a secret burning inside him. That Sunday, Cardinal Tagle announced he would be leaving earlier than planned. He thanked the congregation for their warmth, blessed them with his usual eloquence, and promised to return soon. The parishioners